Hi, my name is Luna. And this is the part of my life I never thought I'd tell anyone. I never thought my life would change because I came home early one Tuesday afternoon. The rain was coming down hard in Portland that day, one of those gray, endless drizzles that soaks into your bones. I'd just nailed a pitch with a major tech client downtown, and my manager told me, "Go home. Luna. Celebrate. You crushed it." I smiled, grateful for the rare midweek break. All I wanted was to share the win with someone who cared. Naturally, I thought of my family. Rick and Marianne Hart. My parents had been living with me for the past 2.5 years. Ever since Dad's auto repair shop went under. They promised it would be temporary. It never was. My younger brother Ethan lived here, too. He was figuring things out, which mostly meant sleeping until noon and talking about starting a podcast he never started. None of them paid rent. I covered everything mortgage on a $795. Zero house in the Pearl District. Utilities. Groceries. Internet. Their gas. Their Netflix. Their comfort was my burden and my duty, as Mom always called it. But that day, I came home unannounced through the side entrance. Trying not to track mud in from the rain, I walked into the kitchen, soaking wet but lighthearted, rehearsing how I'd share the news. "Hey guys, I just landed our biggest account this quarter." I imagined Dad cracking a smile. "Maybe a good job." Kiddo. Instead, I froze. Through the thin wall between the kitchen and the guest room, Dad's makeshift office, I heard his voice, loud and clear on speakerphone. "Yeah. Man," he said with a dry chuckle. "We're still staying with Luna. What choice do we have? The woman's got the money. I mean, hell. She was born to bankroll us." The voice on the other end, his old buddy from the shop. Terry laughed. "Guess it's good to have a daughter with a 6-figure job." Huh. Then came the sentence that felt like a hammer to my chest. "She's just a paycheck with a pulse. Always has been." My breath caught in my throat. Dad kept talking like I was some business transaction. Not his daughter. I mean, come on, 33. No husband. No kids. No life. Just work. And she acts like we should be grateful for what, letting us live in a house she barely uses. I stood still, paralyzed, heart thudding in my ears. I wanted to barge in, to scream, to confront him. But I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I just, listened. "She was never meant to be anything but our backup plan," he said. "Our backup plan." The call ended, at least on his side. But then came the voice that cut deeper. "Mom, she must have walked in." Because I heard her say, still complaining about Luna. Dad laughed again. "Just telling Terry the truth." Mom sighed. "I get it. She's cold. Like everything with her is transactional. Remember, Christmas. Those expensive gifts, watches we didn't need just to show off how much she makes. She tries to buy our love." Dad said, "I mean, how else would she get it?" They both laughed. I was still standing in the kitchen, rain dripping from my coat onto the floor. I couldn't feel my hands. Mom's voice softened. "Well, another year or two and we'll have enough saved to move near Ethan when he finally settles down. That's the dream. She won't even notice." Dad replied, "She's got that job. Her little protein shakes. And those finance friends who only talk about market forecasts. Not like she has real people. Real people. Not like she has real people. They saw me as a wallet, a temporary hotel, an investment. Not once did they mention love or pride. Or appreciation. Only convenience. I backed out of the kitchen like a ghost. Quiet as breath. I didn't even feel my shoes hit the pavement as I walked back to the car. I couldn't think. I couldn't cry. I just drove. I ended up at Chloe's apartment 2 hours north in Seattle without remembering how I got there. The moment I walked in, she knew something was wrong. I collapsed into her arms, still soaking wet. I heard them. I whispered, "They think I'm nothing but a paycheck." Chloe didn't ask who they were. She already knew. Chloe's apartment in Seattle was a second-story haven nestled above a yoga studio and a vegan cafe. Everything about it felt soft white linen curtains, velvet cushions, the smell of eucalyptus and peppermint tea. I sat on her couch, legs curled under me, wearing a hoodie that wasn't mine and trying to keep my hands from shaking. She handed me a steaming mug and didn't say anything for a moment. Just let me sit there in the silence. With the low hum of rain on the window and the distant clatter of plates from the cafe below, "You don't have to talk," she said gently. But I did. Because if I didn't get it out now, I might never be able to. They said I was just a paycheck. I began. My voice, a hoarse whisper, that I was nothing but their backup plan. Chloe didn't flinch. She just nodded slowly. You heard your parents say that I nodded. And laughed about it. Like I was a walking ATM. Like 33. Single. Successful. It was something to mock. She didn't interrupt. She knew me well enough to know that once I started, it would all pour out. I paid for everything. The house. The groceries. Utilities. Even Ethan's car insurance. I cooked for them. I covered medical bills. I gave up so much. My chest tightened. I gave up Harvard Business School. Full scholarship. I got accepted and declined because they were panicking about the mortgage. They didn't even ask me to stay. They just implied it. And I did it. I gave it up for them. Chloe's brows lifted in disbelief. You never told me that. I didn't tell anyone. I convinced myself it didn't matter. That the University of Oregon MBA was still good. That I was still winning. I looked down at my tea. But I was losing. Slowly. Every year. Losing pieces of myself. My 20s vanished into late nights at work and check writing for their comfort. And all this time, she said, You thought they were proud of you. I gave a hollow laugh. Proud, no? Grateful. Maybe. But they're not even that. Chloe leaned forward. Her voice steady. Luna. What they said to each other when they thought you weren't listening, that's who they really are. People will show you the truth when they feel safe from consequences. It was a brutal truth. But she wasn't wrong. I began listing the memories aloud, like confessions the birthday dinner they canceled because Ethan got dumped. The 3 Christmases in a row when they gave me nothing but socks and a candle while Ethan got a new phone. The time I got a $20. 0 bonus, and they said, Great. Maybe now you can finally fix the deck. There were hundreds of moments like that. Moments I'd buried. Excused. Rationalized. They love Ethan. I said. Without conditions. He doesn't need to achieve anything. He just breathes and they treat him like he's royalty. And you, Chloe, asked? I have to earn it. Every ounce of affection is tied to my usefulness. We sat in silence for a while. Then she said, So what now? That was the question. What now? The Luna who came to Seattle was hurt? Broken. Exhausted. But the Luna sitting here tonight was angry. Awake. And, maybe for the first time in her life, free. I'm selling the house. I said aloud for the first time. I'm getting out. Out, Chloe echoed. Of Portland. Of that house? Of the prison I've built from guilt and obligation? I'm moving to Boulder. Colorado? Chloe's mouth curled into a small smile. Mountains. Sunshine. New beginnings? I like it. I've always wanted to live near the Rockies. I said. I visited Boulder once in college. I remember standing by the Flatirons and thinking, this is where I'll start over someday. Chloe didn't ask if I was sure. She knew I was. That night, while she slept, I opened my laptop and created a spreadsheet not for my clients, but for myself. I listed my assets, equity, liquid savings, cost of living comparisons. It felt strange to be using my skills for me. Underneath the numbers, I typed something bold in all caps: Freedom Plan, Luna Heart. It wasn't just a financial model. It was my declaration. I calculated what it would cost to move, how quickly I could sell the house, what kind of job offers were available in Boulder, what kind of life I could build if I just let myself breathe. I didn't tell anyone yet, not my boss, not my parents, not Ethan. It was still mine. My secret freedom. The fog had started to lift, and I could see something resembling light on the other side. I closed my laptop, took a deep breath, and smiled for the first time in what felt like years. Leaving wasn't just about packing boxes. It was about unlearning a lifetime of guilt, and guilt doesn't pack neatly into cardboard. Back in Portland, I returned to my house, as their house, with a calmness that surprised even me. Not because I'd forgiven anything, but because I had something more powerful now: clarity. I wasn't trapped anymore. I had a way out. And that changed everything. I started making quiet moves. Every morning before the sun rose, I sat at the kitchen island, my laptop open, in coffee steaming, working on what I called the Freedom Plan. At first, it was just a budget and timeline. Then it grew. I created folders: exit strategy, Boulder life, emotional detox. I wasn't just moving out, I was moving on. By day, I wore the same composed mask I'd always worn: the dutiful daughter, the financial backbone, the calm in the chaos. By night, I boxed up my past in silence. Childhood journals, yearbooks, awards my parents never asked about. I touched each item like it was a wound. One Saturday afternoon, as I folded away old sweaters, my mom passed by and said casually, "Hey, your father's thinking of converting the garage into a gym. Can you cover the renovations?" I paused. "No." She blinked. "What do you mean?" "No, I mean, I won't be paying for any more upgrades to this house, especially since it won't be mine much longer." Silence. That heavy kind of silence that changes the air in the room. "Excuse me," she said, voice thin. "We'll talk later," I replied, and walked away before I said too much. Too soon. That evening, I found myself sitting on the floor of my childhood bedroom, surrounded by half-filled boxes and dust. In the bottom drawer of my desk, I found something I hadn't seen in over a decade: a letter I wrote to myself at 19. It was sealed in an envelope labeled "Open when you're 30." I opened it. "Dear Luna, if you're reading this, it means you've made it to 30. I hope you've done something bold. I hope you've learned to say no. I hope you've stopped putting yourself last." I read those words over and over until they blurred. I was 33, and I hadn't done any of those things yet. The next morning, I called a real estate agent named Sandra. She showed up that afternoon, confident, no nonsense, heels clicking across the hardwood. "With this market, You'll have offers within weeks, she said. Inspecting the kitchen, I want to sell in under 60 days. I told her, ready for something new, more than you know. That night, I did something I'd practiced in my head for years. I wrote the email. Subject moving forward, Dear Rick, Marianne, and Ethan. I wanted to let you know that I've decided to sell the house and move to Boulder, Colorado. I've supported this household for a long time, and I'm grateful I could. But now, I'm choosing something for me. You'll have 60 days notice. I'll assist with the transition as best I can. With respect, Luna. I read it 3 times before hitting send and I read it Lugaset. Then I shut my laptop and braced myself. The fallout came quickly. Ethan called first. Are you serious? Where's this coming from? From years of putting myself last? I replied, Mom and Dad are freaking out. They'll be okay. I said, I'm not abandoning them. I'm just choosing me. The next day, Mom refused to speak to me. Dad just grunted as he passed me in the hall. The air in the house changed thicker, colder. But strangely, I didn't feel small anymore. I felt free. Chloe sent me a text later that night, proud of you. Proud doesn't even cover it. I replied, it's scary. But good scary. Over the next few days, I listed every item in the house by category: keep, sell, donate. I sold furniture, posted photos of decor pieces online, met strangers in parking lots for cash exchanges. Every item gone felt like shedding a layer of the version of me that had stayed too long. The night before the listing went live, I walked through the house one last time in silence. I ended in the backyard, where the wind felt like a whisper, you're doing the right thing. And for once, I believed it. The moving truck pulled away from the curb just as the sun broke over the rooftops of Portland. I stood on the sidewalk, holding a thermos of lukewarm coffee, watching as the last physical ties to my past disappeared around the corner. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from something new. Anticipation. Maybe. Or freedom. Inside the house, the rooms echoed. No couches. No family photos. Just dust outlines where furniture used to be. I walked through each room one last time, pausing by the doorway to my parents' bedroom. The door was ajar. They hadn't said goodbye that morning. They hadn't said goodbye the night before either. I lingered for a moment, hoping for something. A hug. A word. A gesture. But the silence was the only answer they had left to give me. In the hallway, Ethan stood with his arms crossed, blocking my way out. So this is it, he asked. You're really leaving us? I'm not leaving you. I said gently. I'm finding me. You always were selfish, he muttered. Stepping aside, I didn't argue. I just picked up my bag and walked out the door. The drive to Boulder took 16 hours. I split it into 2 days, staying overnight in a small town in Idaho. The motel was old, with cracked paint on the walls and sheets that smelled like bleach. Still, it felt like a palace. Because it was mine. I wasn't doing this for anyone else. As I crossed the Colorado state line, I pulled over at a rest stop and stood looking out across the plains. The wind was sharp, tugging at my hair and sleeves. But it felt like a reset button. I whispered, "You did it." Just to hear it out loud. Boulder greeted me with open skies and a crispness in the air that smelled like pine and promise. I pulled into the driveway of a small, 2-bedroom rental at the edge of town. The house was modest white shutters, a wraparound porch, a single tree in the front yard. but it was mine. Every nail. Every step. Every light switch, I paid for this. I chose this. The first night alone was quiet, eerily so. I sat on the hardwood floor eating Chinese takeout straight from the container. No television, no noise, just me and the sound of my own chewing. And yet, it wasn't lonely. It was sacred. For the first time, I didn't have to shrink myself to fit into someone else's world. Over the next few days, I unpacked slowly. Not just boxes, but pieces of myself. I found old books I loved. A paint set I hadn't touched since college. Candles I bought but never lit because my mom hated strong smells. I lit every one of them. I hung photos of places I wanted to go: Greece, Iceland, Tokyo, and not a single person scoffed or asked how I'd afford it. On my third morning, I walked into a small local cafe called the Foxhole. The barista had purple hair and a smile that didn't feel like customer service. "First time in?" she asked. "Just moved here." I said, "Well, welcome to your second life. What's your name?" "Luna." "Beautiful. I'm Ray. And this?" She gestured around the cozy shop. "Is our little sanctuary for misfits and fresh starts?" I smiled. That's exactly what I needed. By the end of the week, I had a local library card, a gym membership, and a journal already filling with plans and poetry. But the hardest part wasn't logistics. It was detoxing emotionally. Every time my phone buzzed, I flinched. I kept waiting for a guilt-laced message, a demand, an accusation. But they never came. Their silence was loud, but it was also revealing. I began therapy for the first time in my life. My therapist, Julia, had soft eyes and a voice like a calm river. "Why do you think you stayed so long?" she asked during our second session. "Because I believed I was the only thing holding them together." I said, "And what about you?" That question hit me like a freight train. What about me? I realized I'd spent 3 decades as scaffolding for other people's lives, never daring to build my own. But now, brick by brick, I was laying a foundation. A home within myself. A week later, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a card. Blank except for one line: "You didn't deserve what we gave you. But you survived it anyway." No signature. But I didn't need one. Some part of me knew it came from someone in the family, maybe even my father. I cried for an hour. Not because it changed anything, but because for the first time, someone admitted the truth. The healing had started. That weekend, I hiked up Mount Sanitas at sunrise. Alone. I stood at the summit. Wind in my face. Breath ragged from the climb. Below me was Boulder. Behind me was Portland. And ahead, everything. I closed my eyes and whispered, "I'm proud of you, Luna." And for the first time in my life, I meant it. Later that night, I sat on the porch with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders. The moon hung low and full, casting silver shadows on the street. I thought about all the nights I had spent trying to fall asleep in Portland, my mind racing with everyone else's problems. Here, the silence wasn't heavy. It was healing. I began writing letters I never intended to send to my mother, to Ethan, to myself. At 15, I forgave them in ink. If not in reality, maybe one day I'd burn those pages under the stars. Or maybe I'd keep them as proof that I had the courage to feel it all. On Sunday morning, I wandered through the Boulder Farmers Market. I bought fresh bread, lavender honey, and a bouquet of sunflowers. A vendor offered me a free peach just because I smiled. I'd forgotten how it felt to be seen without being used. That afternoon, I started painting again. Nothing special, just watercolors on thick paper. But the brush in my hand felt like a lifeline. The colors spilled freely. No. Approval required. And for the first time, I felt like Luna wasn't just a name. She was becoming a person. The first few weeks in Boulder had felt like a dream, new beginnings, quiet mornings, and a sense of liberation. But dreams, like the tide, eventually recede to reveal the grit beneath. And for Luna, reality was waiting. Rent was due. Groceries were dwindling. The excitement of freedom gave way to the ache of uncertainty. Her savings, which once felt like a cushion, now looked frighteningly thin. Every dollar she spent whispered, "Are you sure this was the right choice?" Luna had found a part-time job at a local bookstore called Fern and Ink, quaint, independent, and painfully underfunded. The owner, Martha, was kind but overwhelmed. Luna found herself juggling everything from stocking shelves to running the register and organizing dusty backrooms. You have a college degree, and now you're restocking greeting cards, she muttered to herself on bad days. One Tuesday afternoon, she was helping a customer find the alchemist when a man in a button-down shirt came in with a clipboard. He asked for the owner. Luna told him Martha was in the back. 10 minutes later, Martha emerged pale and shaken. "They're raising the rent on the building," she said. "We might not make it through the winter." Luna felt the floor beneath her tilt. The store wasn't just a job, it was her anchor. That night, she sat at her kitchen table, lights dimmed to save electricity, staring at her budget spreadsheet. She was down to $214 in checking. No emergency fund, no backup plan. "Why did you think you could do this?" she whispered into the dark. The voice in her head, her mother's voice, answered coldly, "Because you're naive." The next morning, she pulled on her best sweater, took a deep breath, and walked into a local cafe known for hiring artists and misfits. She left her resume, trying not to look desperate. Then she did the same at a yoga studio, a flower shop, and even a dog walking company. "I'll do anything," she said. "I just need something steady." Days passed. No calls. Meanwhile, the bookstore grew quieter. Fewer customers. More unpaid invoices. One afternoon, Martha confided, "If sales don't pick up, we're closing by November." Luna nodded and smiled. But inside, panic burned. That night, she stood in the shower and let the water run cold. She couldn't afford to heat it. "I left everything for this," she whispered. "And now I can't even pay for hot water." She sobbed gut-wrenching sobs where shame and fear collided. The next morning, she almost didn't get out of bed. Almost. But then she saw the small postcard taped to her mirror. "Your second life begins the moment you realize you only have one." So she got up. She returned to Fern and Ink and pitched an idea. What if we hosted open mic nights, local writers, musicians? Make it a space where people gather. Martha blinked. That might actually work. Luna made flyers. She dropped them at cafes, libraries, and community boards. She made a Facebook page and DM'd every artist she could find. The first event had 5 people, a poet, 2 acoustic guitarists, a retired teacher reciting haikus, and Luna herself, reading her essay, "Leaving Isn't Always Running." The second event had 12. The third 32. By the end of the month, Fern and Ink had lines out the door on Friday nights. People brought wine. They bought books. And Luna. She began to believe she was worth more than survival. But just as things felt stable, her phone rang. It was Ethan. Dad had a stroke. Mild. But he's in the hospital. He asked for you. Luna's world froze. Why, she asked. Ethan was quiet. Maybe he finally realized you're not the villain. That night, Luna stood on her porch, staring at the stars. The guilt weighed heavy. The ache of family, no matter how fractured, never really left. She called the hospital and spoke with a nurse. Her father was alert, stable. Then she wrote him a letter. I hope you recover. I'm building something here. And I can't abandon it. But I'm thinking of you. It wasn't poetic, but it was honest. Later that week, Luna stood behind the counter at Fern and Ink, smiling as a young girl picked out her first book. Outside, snow began to fall soft. Slow. Inevitable. Life was still uncertain. Rent was still tight. But Luna had begun to trust her resilience. She had been brave enough to leave, brave enough to stay, and now, brave enough to build. That Sunday, Ray from the coffee shop dropped by with a tray of muffins. You saved this place, she said. I hope you know that. Luna shook her head. I didn't save anything. I just tried. Ray tilted her hill. Sometimes trying is the bravest thing. That night, Luna wrote in her journal until her hand cramped. But for once, she didn't write about what was missing. She wrote about what she was creating. A life that was finally hers. And for the first time in years, she slept through the night without panic. In her dream, she walked barefoot through snow, but the ground was warm. Maybe that's what healing felt like. Cold on the outside. But fire? Slowly, quietly, beginning to burn underneath. The first snowfall of December painted Boulder in silence. Sidewalks softened under powder. Tree branches bowed with the weight of white. Luna stood behind the window of Fern and Ink, cradling a mug of black coffee that had long gone cold. She wasn't thinking about customers or book displays or Friday night's open mic lineup. She was thinking about the envelope that had arrived 2 days ago, postmarked from Portland, bearing her father's handwriting. She hadn't opened it. It sat on her kitchen table like a fossil. Evidence of a life she'd left behind but hadn't outrun. Forgiveness, she realized, was not a light switch. It was more like a sunrise, gradual, reluctant, and often obscured by clouds. Inside, she knew, were words he had never said aloud. And yet, part of her was terrified they wouldn't be what she needed. That morning, she did her usual walk to the bookstore, passing the community garden covered in frost, the red brick church with its glowing stained glass, and the same stray cat that always eyed her with judgmental curiosity. As the store opened, Ray dropped by with her usual grin and a box of fresh scones. You look like someone who just read a ghost story, she teased. Close. Luna said, a letter from my father. Ray's smile softened. Want to talk about it? Luna shook her head. Not yet. Business that day was slow. The snow had made people cozy indoors. So she shelved returns, restocked bestsellers, and reorganized the poetry section, but nothing calmed the noise inside. That night, back in her apartment, she sat at the kitchen table and lit a candle. She slid the letter closer, then paused. Her hand trembled. What if it wasn't an apology? What if it was a justification, a dismissal, or worse? Silence dressed as sentiment. Still. She opened it. It wasn't long. A single page. His handwriting a little shakier than she remembered. Luna, I've done a lot of thinking. A stroke will do that to a man. I was wrong to push you away. I didn't know how to love someone who reminded me of everything I lost. You didn't deserve that. I don't expect forgiveness. Just wanted you to know. If you ever come home, the door's not locked. Dad? She read it twice. Then again, the words weren't perfect. But they were honest. Maybe that was enough. The next day, she walked into Fern and Ink carrying a box of old journals. She decided to start a memory corner in the back of the store. Filled with vintage letters, donated diaries, even old postcards. A place for people to connect through the fragments they left behind. Martha loved the idea. Customers began to donate stories of their own. One man left a letter from his late wife, folded inside her favorite novel. A teenager dropped off the diary she'd written while going through her first heartbreak. People cried in that corner. People healed. And Luna began to understand something she hadn't before. Forgiveness wasn't a gift you gave someone else, it was a gift you gave yourself. Weeks passed. The bookstore was thriving. Local papers wrote about its transformation from a sleepy shop to a creative hub. Luna began teaching a Sunday writing circle. She mentored high school students who wanted to self-publish. She even helped a retired Army veteran complete his memoir. But the letter still sat on her bookshelf. Not tucked away. Not forgotten. Just there. One Sunday morning, she sat with Ray over coffee. They talked about everything and nothing until Ray asked, "Would you ever go back?" Luna thought for a long time. Maybe not to stay, but maybe to visit. Maybe to see who I was and who I've become. Ray smiled. That's the thing about healing. It doesn't ask you to erase the past, just to stop living there. Later that night, Luna pulled out her journal. Today I realized I'm no longer angry, just tired. And that's a kind of peace too. She decided to write back. Her letter wasn't dramatic or poetic. It was simple. Dear Dad, thank you for your letter. I'm still figuring things out, but I appreciate your honesty. Maybe I'll come visit in the spring. Until then, take care. Luna, she walked to the mailbox. Heart pounding. Snow crunched beneath her boots. The moon above glowed like a silent witness. She mailed it. That night, as snow fell heavier, she curled under her blanket with a cup of tea and the quiet satisfaction that comes from doing something brave. A few days later, Luna was shelving a new shipment of books when a woman walked in carrying a tote bag full of worn journals. Her name was Irene. And she said, "These belong to my sister. She passed last year. She was a teacher. She believed stories could keep people alive." Luna nodded slowly. "Would you like to donate them to the memory corner?" Irene's eyes welled. "Yes, I'd like that very much." That afternoon, Luna created a display with a small wooden sign. These stories mattered. So do yours. She lit a small candle beside it. People stopped to read. Some cried. Some smiled. One elderly man whispered, "I haven't told anyone about her in 20 years. But now, I think I could." Luna went home that night with a quiet ache in her chest. The good kind? The kind that tells you you're part of something bigger than yourself. Healing didn't always announce itself. Sometimes it came gently, like snow. Luna stared out the train window as the Colorado landscape blurred into a canvas of gold fields and sharp mountain lines. She hadn't been back to her hometown of Astoria, Oregon in over a decade. The last time she left, she swore she'd never return. Too many shadows. Too many closed doors. But now? She wasn't the same girl who ran away. She was someone who built something. Someone who healed, if only partially. The train pulled into the small station just after 6 p.m. A heavy fog clung to the platform. Just like she remembered, her boots echoed softly as she stepped onto the concrete. A familiar pickup truck idled nearby. Her father sat behind the wheel, hands gripping it like he wasn't sure whether to stay or drive away. She took a breath and approached. He got out. "Luna," he said, almost whispering. "Hi." "Dad?" The hug was awkward and brief, but real. They didn't say much on the drive home. Just small talk about the weather and how the town hadn't changed much. The same diners, same grocery store. Even the old movie theater still ran Sunday matinees. At the house, Luna paused before stepping inside. It smelled like coffee and cedar. Just like it used to. The couch was new, but the photo of her mother still sat above the fireplace. That night, she slept in her childhood bedroom. The posters were gone, but the indentations on the carpet from old furniture still remained. Memory clung to the walls. The next morning, she walked alone to the cemetery where her mother was buried. The air was cold and wet. She stood by the headstone and whispered things she hadn't said in years, regrets, apologies, moments she wished they'd shared. "I'm trying, Mom," she said, her voice breaking. "I really am." That afternoon, her father asked if she wanted to see the lake. They drove in silence again. But it was less tense now, more reflective. When they arrived, the lake was still, fog curling at the edges like breath. Luna walked down the old wooden dock. She remembered fishing there as a girl, legs dangling. Her mom's laugh in the background. "You were always braver than me," her dad said behind her. She turned. "I didn't know how to talk to you after she died. Every time I looked at you, I saw her, and it hurt." Luna nodded slowly. "You could have said that. I'm saying it now." They didn't hug, but something shifted like thawing ice. Later that week, she visited her old high school. The librarian recognized her and insisted she speak to the creative writing class. She hesitated, then agreed. She read from her journal, and a silence settled over the room. Afterward, a girl with purple hair asked, "How do you forgive someone who isn't sorry?" Luna smiled softly. "You forgive them so you can move forward, not so they can feel better." When she returned to the house, her father had made her favorite soup, chicken, and wild rice. They ate in near silence. But it wasn't awkward. It was companionable. Safe. Before leaving, she placed a photo of her bookstore on the mantel. "So you can see where I've been," she said. He nodded. "I's missing." On the train ride back to Boulder, Luna felt something loosen inside her. Not everything was perfect. Not everything was resolved. But it didn't have to be. Sometimes the best we can do is show up, speak the truth, and let time do the rest. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. As the train curved through the winding passes toward Colorado, Luna opened her journal. The pages were worn, dog-eared, filled with years of grief, discovery, and hesitant joy. She wrote, "I didn't go home to change the past. I went to remember that I had survived it." That evening, back in Boulder, she returned to the bookstore. Ray had left a note on the register, "Missed you." The poetry group rebelled and read love poems, Hope you're okay. Luna smiled. She was okay. Not whole. Not complete, but okay in the way that mattered. Later that week, she hosted an event titled Letters to the Ones Who Left. Dotsons showed up. Some read aloud to parents. Others to lost lovers. Some, even to versions of themselves they'd outgrown. When it was Luna's turn, she read the letter she never sent her mother. Her voice cracked. But she kept going. And when she finished, there was silence thick, respectful, sacred. A teenage boy stood up. I thought I was the only one who still talks to someone who's not here. Luna wiped a tear and said, You're never the only one. That night, snow began to fall again. Through the windows of fern and ink, it looked like glitter drifting from the sky. Luna locked the door, turned out the lights, and stood by the window. She whispered, Thank you for staying, to the empty space around her. But maybe it wasn't empty anymore. Before heading home, Luna stopped by the old bridge at the edge of town, the one that overlooked Boulder Creek. The water below moved slowly, frozen at the edges but alive at the center. Like her, she stood there for a while, breathing in the cold air, and let the silence say everything she couldn't. Life, she realized, wasn't about forgetting. It was about remembering with less pain and more grace. And in that moment, she made a promise not to erase the past, but to build something beautiful from its brokenness. The cold morning air carried the sharp scent of winter as Luna stood before the empty storefront on Maple Avenue. It was nothing more than a dusty shell-cracked windows, faded signage, and floorboards that creaked like tired memories. But in Luna's eyes, it was possibility. Opening Fern and Ink had saved her. Expanding it, that felt like risking it all again. But wasn't that the point of growth? Not staying safe, but choosing to believe in more, even when the past made you cautious. Ray was skeptical. You sure about this? One store nearly wrecked you financially the first year. I'm sure, Luna said, because this time, we're not alone. Word spread fast around Boulder. Locals who once found solace at Luna's readings now stopped by to donate old books, paint shelves, even bring muffins for volunteers. It became a movement proof that stories matter, and that a space for them could grow from broken places. But just 2 weeks before the grand opening, disaster struck. A pipe burst during a snowstorm. Water gushed into the back room, soaking inventory, destroying first editions Luna had personally selected, and warping the handmade oak shelves. When she got the call, she dropped her coffee and drove in silence, gripping the steering wheel so tight her knuckles turned white. When she saw the damage, her breath left her. It felt like the past was mocking her hope. This was a mistake, she whispered to Ray, who had followed her in. I shouldn't have, no. Ray cut in. You're allowed to cry, but don't say you shouldn't have tried. You're not that girl anymore. Luna sank to the floor. Vet wood beneath her, tears mixing with the smell of mildew and varnish. Later that night, she sat at her kitchen table staring at her financials. Insurance would only cover half. They'd be short at least $12. Ling. She could take a loan, but it felt like a return to the fear she thought she'd left behind. She looked at the wall where she kept old thank you notes from customers. One in particular caught her eye. It read, Your story night saved my life. Please never stop creating spaces like this. And that was it. The next morning, she created a short video explaining what happened. She told the truth not just about the damage, but about her journey, about why this mattered. She called it more than a bookstore. She posted it online and waited. What happened next stunned her. Thousands of views. Hundreds of messages. Donations poured in. Sleeper seas with clears. A local carpenter offered to fix the shelves for free. A high school literature club raised $800 by selling bookmarks they'd hand-drawn. One elderly woman from Nebraska sent $10 with a letter, "It's all I can spare. But your words reached me." In 2 weeks, they'd raised more than they needed. Opening day came with snowflakes in the air and music on the sidewalk. People lined up around the block. Kids ran inside to the children's reading corner. Luna watched a young couple hold hands in the poetry aisle. An elderly man read aloud to his wife. Luna stood at the counter. Heart full. Eyes wide. She'd done it. But more than that, they had done it together. And sometimes, when she locked the doors at night, she'd sit under the string lights, sipping tea, and whisper, "Thank you," to the shelves, the walls, the ghosts of all the moments that tried to break her but didn't. Because every chapter she once feared had turned into a paragraph in a much bigger story. A story still being written. A week after the opening, Luna invited everyone who had contributed, even those who gave just a few dollars or painted a single shelf. She hosted what she called a gratitude night. String lights glowed across the ceiling. Ray baked cinnamon scones. People came with stories not about books, but about why they believed in the place. A teenager stood up first. "I used to sit at the back and pretend to read, just so I had somewhere warm to go after school. Now, I write my own poems. This place taught me I matter." A veteran in his 60s added, "After my wife passed, this was the first place I came back to." Luna read a passage from Steinbeck that made me cry for the first time in 10 years. Luna listened, holding her tea close. Eyes misty. When it was her turn, she simply said, "I built these walls with wood and nails, but you filled them with meaning. Thank you." After the event, she lingered alone in the new store. She glanced at the chalkboard by the door where customers left notes. One said, "Every bookshop is a lighthouse. Thanks for keeping this one lit." She touched the note gently and smiled. As she turned off the lights, Luna felt it again, not fear, not grief, but presence, a quiet knowing that she was exactly where she needed to be, doing what she was born to do. And in the silence of that space she had resurrected, she knew the store may return. The shelves may fall again someday. But so would she rise again and again with every story. Every soul that walked through that door. It had been a quiet Wednesday when the email arrived, subject line keynote invitation, National Story Summit. Luna clicked it half asleep, expecting another newsletter or publishing pitch. But the words on the screen made her sit upright. The National Storytelling Alliance, an organization she'd admired from afar, was inviting her to deliver the keynote at their annual conference in Chicago. The theme, healing through narrative. Her first thought wasn't excitement. It was panic. I'm not an academic. I'm not a best-selling author. I run a small bookstore in Colorado. Ray found her in the back office later, staring at the email. "You look like you saw a ghost," Ray said, handing her tea. "I think they invited the wrong Luna," she whispered. Ray smiled. Or maybe the world's finally catching up to the right one. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of anxiety and preparation. Luna wrote draft after draft, never satisfied. Her words sounded hollow, too rehearsed. She reread old journal entries, customer notes, anything that reminded her of the real reason she began this journey. The night before the flight, Luna stood in front of her bedroom mirror practicing the opening lines. "My name is Luna, and I believe stories saved my life." No, Too dramatic. She tried again. I'm not a scholar. I'm a survivor. Still wrong. In the end, she packed her notes but promised herself something she'd speak from her scars, not her script. When she arrived at the venue, the size of the ballroom nearly knocked the air from her lungs. Rows upon rows of chairs, a stage bathed in warm lights, and banners that read, "Stories that heal." Backstage, a coordinator clipped a mic to her collar. Her heart pounded. Her palms were slick with nerves. She thought of backing out. But then she looked out into the crowd and saw them dozens of faces. Some young, some old, some leaning forward like they were already listening. Among them was a woman in the front row with her hand over her heart, as if holding something inside. That was all it took. Luna stepped onto the stage, took a deep breath, and began. I used to believe that stories were just for escape. But I was wrong. Stories don't just let us run, they teach us how to return. She told them about the first bookstore, about the pipe burst, about the community that rose like a chorus to hold her dream together. She spoke of the girl she used to be tired, lonely, stitched together with silence, and the woman who now stood before them because someone, somewhere, believed her story mattered. She paused halfway, emotions catching in her throat. I stand here not because I conquered pain, but because I stopped hiding from it. The room was silent. Not the kind of silence born from politeness, but reverence. A silence that listens. When she finished, there was no applause at first, just stillness. And then, one by one, people rose to their feet. The ovation rolled like thunder across the ballroom. Afterward, strangers hugged her. A college professor invited her to speak at their university. A small publisher asked if she'd consider turning her journey into a memoir. But what touched Luna most was a young girl, maybe 12, who handed her a folded note. It read, I want to be like you when I grow up. Not because you're famous, because you're kind. That night, back in her hotel room, Luna sat by the window overlooking the city lights. She thought of that scared woman years ago, frozen by fear in her living room, wondering if she'd ever rise again. And here she was, not just rising but lifting others with her. Maybe stories weren't just meant to be told, maybe they were meant to be lived boldly, vulnerably, and out loud. The next morning, Luna was invited to a panel discussion with other speakers. As she sat among best-selling authors, activists, and therapists, she listened carefully, nodding, sometimes smiling, but mostly absorbing. When the moderator asked, "What's one thing every story should do?" Luna didn't hesitate. "Make people feel less alone," she said. The room murmured in agreement. During the book signing that afternoon, she met attendees who had driven hours just to hear her speak. One woman said, "I lost my husband last year. Your words reminded me it's okay to feel broken and still move forward." Another man told her, "My teenage daughter listened to your talk online and wants to volunteer at our library now." These moments weren't just affirmations, they were seeds. Evidence that Luna's pain had bloomed into something that others could hold on to. On her flight home, she watched clouds drift like thoughts across the sky and pulled out her notebook. She didn't write a speech or a draft. She wrote a promise. I will never silence the voice that once saved me. I will keep telling the truth, even when my hands shake. Back in Boulder, Ray greeted her at the airport with sunflowers and a coffee. "So," Ray grinned. "Did you change the world?" Luna laughed. "No. But maybe I helped someone believe in theirs." That night, She returned to Fern and Ink. The bookstore glowed softly under the golden street lamp, like it had been waiting for her. Inside, everything was exactly as she'd left it, warm, imperfect, alive. She walked over to the small shelf by the register labeled Luna's Picks. She reached into her bag, pulled out her notebook, and placed it there with a sticky note. Coming soon, a mémoire, a real one. Luna no longer feared telling her story. Now, she feared not telling it because she'd seen what happened when truth met courage. It built bridges. It lit rooms. It saved lives. And maybe, just maybe, it could change the world after all. The day Luna released her memoir, the bookstore was humming with warmth and wonder. It wasn't just the launch of a book, it was the unveiling of a life that had, for so long, unfolded in silence. The cover was simple, a watercolor painting of a mountain ridge, with a single wildflower growing from a crack in the rock. The title, Speak the Quiet. And beneath it, in small script by Luna Owens, she never thought those words by Luna Owens would mean so much. But they did. Because they weren't just ink on paper, they were a declaration that she had survived, that her voice mattered, that the quiet didn't win. Dozens of locals packed Fern and Ink that morning, many of them clutching mugs of coffee or dog-eared notebooks. Teens from the local high school, retirees who'd watched the bookstore rise from rubble, a few travelers who'd read about her story online, all gathered in reverence. Luna stepped behind the counter, heart-pounding, and opened her book to the dedication page. She read it aloud. For the ones who thought no one was listening, I was. The room stilled. A few tears were wiped away. A few breaths held. And then she began reading. Pages from her life gutted, stitched, reborn, now held in hands that would carry them into the world. Over the next few weeks, the memoir spread far beyond Boulder. Reviewers praised its rawness. Book clubs debated its themes. A popular podcast featured her in a 2-part interview, calling her the voice of quiet strength. But Luna didn't care about fame. What mattered to her was that kids who once thought their voices didn't count were now filling journals, writing poems, even standing in front of small open mic nights at the shop. Inspired by that, Luna launched a weekly storytelling workshop for youth called Roots and Wings. It became the heartbeat of Fern and Ink. Every Thursday, the back room transformed posters, beanbags, a stage light they rigged from a repurposed lamp. Kids aged 10 to 18 came with trembling voices and scribbled pages. And Luna. She sat cross-legged on the floor, listening with her whole soul. One boy, Miguel, barely spoke above a whisper the first week. By the third month, he stood in front of 20 peers and read a story about his grandfather crossing the border with nothing but a harmonica and a dream. The room erupted in applause. Another girl, Sienna, once told Luna, "I don't think I matter." Now, her poem about grief had been published in the local paper. Luna didn't just teach. She witnessed. She reminded each child that their story was already enough. As the seasons shifted and the town changed, Luna's influence became a quiet legacy. She was invited to speak at more events, offered awards, even asked to co-teach a writing course at the local college. Still, she returned each night to the same things: her cozy upstairs apartment, the stray cat that had adopted her, and the quiet. One evening in early spring, the town hosted a celebration in her honor. They called it the Night of Stories. Lights twinkled in the square. A small stage was built outside the bookstore, and a line of children, teens, and adults took turns telling stories inspired by Luna's impact. As she sat in the front row, Wrapped in a knitted shawl Ray had made, Luna felt something swell inside her. Not pride. Not achievement. Wholeness. Later that night, as the crowd dispersed and the stars returned to their rightful place in the sky, Luna stood alone under the awning of fern and ink. She looked up, then closed her eyes. She wasn't broken anymore. She wasn't surviving anymore. She was living. The words of her final chapter echoed in her heart. We don't write to be heard. We write to remember who we are. And in remembering, we return home. Finally. The next day, Luna received a letter, not an email, not a message, but a real letter with a wax seal and gold trim. It came from the Library of American Voices, a foundation that honored storytellers who reshaped community through their words. They wanted to include her memoir in their national archive. It would be placed beside voices that had inspired generations. Luna held the letter to her chest and let the tears come. Not of sadness. Not even of joy. But of release. That weekend, she returned to her childhood home, a small blue house 2 hours outside Boulder, where the front porch creaked and wind chimes still whispered old lullabies. She walked through the rooms, each one echoing memories of silence, shame, and small rebellions. In the attic, she found a box marked Luna, 11th grade. Inside were notebooks, half-written songs, a few dried petals, and a photo of her and her mother on the last good day they'd had. She didn't cry this time. She simply sat there, tracing the edges of her past, knowing it no longer defined her but shaped her. That night, by candlelight, she added a new item to the box, her published memoir. Sealed it. Labeled it. Proof. Weeks passed. Life settled into rhythm. Luna kept teaching, listening, loving. The town grew. And so did the ripple of her impact. And somewhere out there, maybe in a small town like hers, another girl sat in a bookstore, trembling over her own pages. And maybe, because of Luna, she would choose not to erase them. Maybe she would speak the quiet too. And that would be enough. That would always be enough.